Today I have Kim on, and then we managed to make it out for a ski tour this past week out in the Mammoth Mountain area. Hit plenty of rocks on the way down. There was a good amount of new snow, but it was so nice that it just was completely unsupportable. Kim is a IFBB pro bodybuilder and is getting ready to head down to Aconcagua here shortly. One of the interesting things about her is that in addition to being a bodybuilder, she crushes endurance events as well. So kind of I guess you'd call it dual personality. So I'll hand it off to Kim to toss anything else in the intro that you want to, and then we'll roll from there and talk Aconcagua.
Nope, you nailed it. I do a bunch of things that don't make sense. Pro bodybuilder, and I do all this other stuff. I live in Big Bear, so I moved out here like 6 years ago, specifically to be in the mountains. And it's not necessarily conducive to bodybuilding, but it's conducive to biking and hiking and skiing and splitboarding and all of the awesome things. However, I wish they were taller. So we tap out here. I don't know if you can't see it. 11.5 is San Gorgonio. So that's the tallest mountain that we have. And we just don't get as much snow as the Eastern Sierras and Tahoe. So that is me. I studied biochemistry and my master's in it. So a lot of the stuff that I focus on is human-based performance as far as supplementation and training. So that's me. That's what I got.
Cool. So curious, coming from the bodybuilding world, why big mountain stuff?
I think anybody that does anything in the mountains, big mountains, can't answer this succinctly because I think that it's like this intrinsic draw to the mountains. I think that I feel like you have to agree with me on this. Don't they just feel like they pull you to them inside? Like, I feel like I get pulled to the mountains. There's not a reason or rhyme or reason as to why them. I think that they just call me. They called me. You know, I live in the mountains and I moved here because I wanted to feel closer to them. I don't know. I think John Muir was like a smart guy. So I think he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, you often send me different quotes from books that you're reading from
All the time.
people like Muir and other authors. So
all the time. Yeah. I do read a lot too. So I think for any of you guys that are getting into this, or so somebody like me that's in a location, I don't have glaciers at my back door, right? The closest glacier is 9 hours away. Northern California actually has glaciers, but they're not close to me. So the best way that I can prepare for this outside of like your typical training stuff is doing a ton of reading from some of the most famous mountaineers that exist. Ed Viesturs, just his book I'm reading right now. And I've just picked up a ton of not only not inspirational quotes, but things that they've gotten in, situations that they've gotten into and written about will give me, fuel to the fire in case I run into a bad situation. And I'm like, oh, I remember reading this in this book. So there's just tidbits of information throughout all of these people's 8,000 meter peak journeys.
right on. And so you have a trip coming up here shortly. So tell me a little bit about that trip that you have planned.
So it's funny. I texted him and I was like, hey, I need a favor. I need you to create some routes for me for this Aconcagua trip. And he's like, of course, we'll do this over the coffee chat. And I said, totally. So I'm going to Argentina to do Aconcagua, which is a 7,000 meter peak. And the backstory, TLDR, is in grad school, I worked in an elevation chamber in our physiology lab. And that's what drew me to Everest. So I was like 18 years old and I used to sit in there. I used to get in trouble all the time. I used to go in there and sit, turn the elevation up to 29,000 feet, ride the recumbent bike and study and test my oxygen saturation. And I was enamored with it ever since. And obviously just because like you want to climb the tallest mountain in the world, I love being the best and the greatest and pushing the hardest. So to me, that was like the ultimate apex of pursuing life goals. So Aconcagua is it's like a natural step towards it. So you do a bunch of stuff here. You usually do Aconcagua, and then you'll do like a few Himalayan peaks that aren't Everest, doing Denali in June. And the reason I decided to do Aconcagua now was I actually read a book called Alive, and it talks about the Fairchild plane crash. So back in the 70s, these rugby players college rugby players got in a plane crash in the Andes Mountains, and half their crew died and half of their team died. So there's 40 people, 20 people died, and half of they had to turn to cannibalism. So this is the cannibalism story, where they had to survive for like 2 months in the middle of winter until it came to spring. And it was just their struggle of how to survive and the whole cannibalism situation. And then I read it and I was like, oh my God, I want to go to the Andes. I want to climb the mountains down there. So that's why.
Right on.
Not looking to eat people though. No plane crashes, no eating people.
Yeah. Not too dissimilar from the Donner Summit story.
Wait, which one's that one? I don't know that one.
So I live in the Reno Tahoe area, and the Donner Summit story is the Donner Party was passing through California, trying to go through this new route that nobody else had done.
When they created the Donner Pass.
Yep. So they were the first people that tried going through Donner Pass, and they ended up getting stuck due to a incredibly high snow year, and then turned to cannibalism to survive.
I mean, you got to do what you got to do, guys, and you got to get your protein in. All right. So, like, I mean, desperate times call for desperate measures.
True meathead answer.
I can never be on this thing again. So that's why Argentina, that's why Aconcagua, it's just a natural progression. I'm also, the rest of my calendar is I have a rainier winter ascent in January. Hopefully. So right now it's a hopeful winter ascent, but we don't actually know what the weather is. Super, super bad. That's a really good Denali training. And then we're doing Denali in a couple months. So super excited.
So to this point, what's the highest elevation you've been to?
I just did Whitney probably 2 months ago on a whim. Yep. Wasn't planned. I was like, I'm gonna go do Whitney. But my best friend lives in Colorado. So I've done, I don't know how many 14ers, a lot. It's a funny story. I did Mount Massive. So bodybuilder, I had a huge national show, like June 15th. I'll have to find pictures. If we post funny pictures with this, I have a hilarious picture. June 15th, I drive right out to Colorado as soon as I fly back. We do Mount Massive like June 20th. It was freezing. Your body can't go from being 5% body fat to climbing a 15,000 foot mountain at like 40. It's just not going to happen. I didn't realize that my heart rate resting was 155, which when we were ski touring, mine is like 99. So I was just so hopped up on stimulants. I was like shitting my brains out and throwing up at the same time in the middle of Mount Massive. Yeah. And they were taking pictures of this. So basically, doing 2 sports is great. But I think this was a couple years ago, over the years, I've had to realize I can't actively compete as a bodybuilder. I can't be in prep and I can't do this at the same time. So I have to pick and choose, like I'm doing mountains or I am getting on stage, but you can't do both just with the supplementation and the stress your body's under.
Yeah. So before we dive into Aconcagua, how do you make the 2 disparate things work together?
You would ask me this question. I feel like we were just talking about this yesterday. So like, I'm very structured. I compartmentalize everything in my life, whether it's emotions or activities. So if you compartmentalize it, bodybuilders do cardio. So I just happen to enjoy cardio. Bodybuilders make it seem like it's like this drudge and they hate it. And they walk on the treadmill for 20 minutes and make it seem like it's this awful thing. I just do it for longer. Depending on what my diet is, I usually do keto for bodybuilding. So when you do keto, you probably know this, but people watching probably don't. You want to do lower intensity steady state cardio just based on your respiratory quotient. You don't want to eat away at muscle more than you have to. So the lower your heart rate, it just depends on what is how much oxygen you're essentially using to do your cardio. So I do lower intensity steady state during bodybuilding, which is great for like bike riding, no sprinting. Running, my heart rate's higher, so I usually just don't run. So I try to keep my heart rate a little lower. And I'll always work out. I'll always train. I'll always lift like a bodybuilder. So that'll always be, so I tell people it's like brushing my teeth. I'll always do it. But as far as diet, as far as calorie intake, we need to do another one of these on like nutrition and stuff like that, because that's a whole separate, bucket. We were talking yesterday, and, climbing these mountains is going to take so much more caloric expenditure and so much more caloric energy for me. So what I've been doing the last month is eating a lot of carbs. I don't like them, but I'm eating them because I know I need to stay about 15 pounds heavier than normal, because I'm assuming I'm going to lose about 10 to 15 pounds on this expedition. So I would like to come in at 10 to 15 pounds lighter. And oh my God, if you guys saw what I was packing, oh my God, if you want to know what I'm packing for food, I'm bringing these bone broth protein. They're like they're little concentrates, almonds, bacon bits, Quest protein chips.
So I think actually a great thing to do is Scott Johnson, who's the coach for Evoke Endurance and road training for the New Alpinism. He talks a lot about fat adaptation. So I think after you get back, could be cool to do a follow-up on how this trip went for you, and then potentially even invite him on as a like altitude and endurance expert to like bounce some ideas and thoughts around afterwards.
This would be so interesting, being a, bodybuilding expert. I don't know. I'm definitely not an endurance expert, but trying to merge the two, because it's always been a balancing act. And I'm sure, I'm doing it all right, but I can always do it better. I climbed Mount Whitney without carbs. I packed like jalapeno peppers. I don't know why. I just put them in a bag. I was like, jalapeno peppers, beef jerky, which I hate beef jerky, guys. I think it's disgusting. So don't like beef jerky.
Yeah. I mean, I guess 30-second version of why fat adaptation is important for in the mountains is because you have about 2,000 calories worth of glycogen in your system. And then you have between 10 and 20,000 calories worth of fat in your system. So if your body can burn the fat that's already on board, then it makes it easier for you to carry less and still perform decently well.
I feel better. I've always felt better. I mean, I don't eat sugar, but just carbs, carbs convert to any carb. People don't realize any carb converts to a sugar, no matter what it is. I don't care if it's brown rice or oatmeal, it's still going to be converted to a sugar at the end of the day. So, sure, glycemic index, which really has no effect on the average person. Doesn't matter what you're eating. If you're eating a carb, it's carb. So
yeah. And like the thing I'm thinking about as we're saying this is the chemistry class from like high school where you burn a nut or a macadamia nut and then burn a chip and see which one burns hotter and faster and which one burns longer and warms up the water more effectively. And that's kind of the pitch image.
I never did this. Oh my God, we should do this on the next one. I never did this.
Perfect. Yeah. Anyways, let's I'm going to share my screen. We'll dive into Aconcagua, and for those that end up just listening, I'll try to do my best to describe verbally what we're doing as we go as well.
I'm sorry, guys, I'm sick, so I'm like hacking up. I don't know what.
All right, Kim, you should be able to see the map of Aconcagua now. Perfect.
Yep.
All right, so I don't know this mountain. The information that we have is going to all be based off this map and then what Kim's guiding company has sent us to this point. So the two known areas that we have are I'm calling it the base camp. The area is Puente del Inca, if you wanted to type it into a search. And that looks like it's where Kim's going to be starting off, because she said they're staying at about 9,000 feet. Then the second point that we have, it just popped up on the screen. It's Plaza de Mulas, and that's at about 14,000 feet. So those are kind of the areas where there's some significant camps. The Puente del Inca base camp that's on the bottom of the screen looks like it has like a town and or some hard structures there. And then same with Plaza de Mulas at 14,000 feet.
And what are we? So we're at 1.5, 2.5. So what are we at? 4, 7, 4. So 11 miles to 14. So what?
Yeah, I have that actually pulled up that we'll hit in a little bit. But I think when you arrive first, I'm going to zoom in on Puente del Inca. You were saying that you're going to be here for 2 days, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So what is your intention for while you are in that zone? What do you want to get done?
I need to get both days close to 14,000. But okay. Y'all, I am slow. I'm 5'2". Unfortunately, you don't know me in real life. He does. I have little legs. I'm like a meatball. So for me to hike up 11, I'm slow and I'm like a pack mule. You just give me all your stuff, I'll carry it, but it'll take me forever. For me to get 11 miles to 14,000 feet, that's going to take me forever. So realistically, since I'm going solo, do we know daylight, where we're at in the world, what their sunrise and sunset is?
I can look that up while we talk.
Okay. So just if you guys, that's something that I always do. I have a Garmin Phoenix, and I always have the sunrise and sunset on my watch because I don't ever want to be stuck at night if I don't have night stuff. So that's one of my goals, is obviously to get acclimated, but not be out for 2 days, since I'm going to be out for 16.
Yeah, so your sunrise is at 6:27 on average in December, and sunset is at 8:44.
That's late.
p.m.
Okay, so that's good. That's like our summer, sort of.
Yeah, you'll be there at their summer solstice.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have summer. We have better sun. So
it's 14 hours and 17 minutes of daylight for you on average.
Okay, so that's my goal, is just to get as high as I can both days, but not kill myself. And can we check temperatures? Can we check temperatures and terrain? As far as, I have seen pictures of this place, people in shorts and t-shirts. I've seen pictures of this place, people in their 8,000 meter gear.
So currently, mountain weather. So my go-to for this is mountainweather.com. It's generally the information gets pulled from NOAA. So for 22,000 feet, this week right now, you have temperatures in Fahrenheit, high of 5 and a low of 3, with a feels like in the -9 to -20 zone, with the winds at the summit. And then at the 9,800 base camp for this week, your low is looking like 48 and your high is looking like 69.
And then where do we sit at 14 temperature?
14, high 30s and mid 40s.
Okay. So I think that's another thing too to know with you guys when you guys are doing this, is those are my typical checks: the sunrise, sunset, temperature, and terrain. So I think that and this is why he's my friend, because he's doing this for me. But realistically, is it dry? Is it going to be like desert? I think it's going to be desert, right? I think this is pretty much
it's a very dry alpine zone.
So very similar to where I'm at out here. So now I just have to pack shorts and a t-shirt. Cool. Great. Super.
Yeah, and you have heavy snowfall actually Sunday night this week. So some potentially changing conditions there. But again, I pull this from mountain-forecast.com, because what you can do on that website is you can actually click on zones by elevation. And so for Aconcagua and other popular mountains, it'll give you the forecast by elevation.
Post the link in the chat. Post it here. Put it in the chat.
Boom, done. Okay. All right. So looking back at our zone here, you have base camp at 9,000 feet. And then you have about a 15-mile hike up to 14,000 feet, which we'll get into. But when you arrive, your goal is to get as high as possible. Now, depending on how you do on travel, you're already set up pretty well, because you're coming from about 7,000 feet, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to recommend for Kim is going to be different than those of you that are coming from sea level, because 9,000 feet is a good staging height for people coming from sea level to decrease altitude sickness later on. And I'll include a link to an acclimation chart and study that talks about why and what I mean by staging. But for Kim, because she's already living over 1,500 meters or over 5,000 feet and below 9,000, then getting to 9,000 isn't a significant change for her. And you have 2 days in the base camp. So really, because you have a lot of big activity coming up, it's not going to necessarily be like, you don't want to do big days and be super tired before you hike up to 14,000 feet. But bumping up a little bit higher so that you have a higher chance of success when you get on the mountain is a good idea, since you already have that initial acclimation. So that's the difference for Kim than people coming from sea level, is that she already is acclimated to 7,000 feet. So bumping up over 9 will work pretty well to continue that acclimation a little bit ahead of time. The one consideration you'll have to...
Whitney screwed me though. I didn't realize going up and down so quickly. I felt it at about going up. I didn't sleep the night before. You guys know you get adrenaline and you're just like, oh, I'm going to sleep. And then you never sleep. But I was drugged up on NyQuil and then took all my stimulants, which like I wouldn't recommend doing, but it happened. So with that aside, going up and then coming down, I was at like 13.5. And then I started to feel it. Because I was just went up and down super, super quickly. I didn't stop at all. Literally just to pee. So I do notice that, people aren't invincible. I'm not invincible, even though I think I am. So I want to be cognizant that I did notice it this go.
Yep.
And I was, you guys know, just like the only thing to do in that instance when you don't have time to acclimate is just get the F down. So I'm like, all right, I'm going down as quick as I can.
Yep. Yeah. So for you, Kim, I see sort of, there are a few options to get a little bit higher for you around. I don't generally recommend going higher than like plus 3,000 feet per day. But since you're going to be like climbing high, sleeping low here, you might be able to bump a little higher. The consideration being that is like, if you're doing 3,000 feet of gain in a day and then you're hiking 15 miles the next day, or even 10 to one of the higher camps, then it's better to be more fully rested when you're doing those moves as well. So one option that I'm seeing is you have Banderita Norte, that is just north of Punta del Inca here. The summit of that is 12.7. And then you have Serra Aguda Salada off here, which the summit of that is 13.5. Okay, so that gets you up pretty darn close to 14K for both of those. And the 12.5 is a good elevation to bump up to from 9K after like a day or a night at 9K to get that bump high and then sleep low. So looking at it, never having been to these mountains, I'm thinking Banderita Norte would be your go-to, because it's also like distance wise the shortest. And then I don't know what the snow conditions are, but with this potential storm coming in, where you see the red in here, that's areas that are over 30 degrees. So avalanche terrain, whereas the white zones are below 30 degrees. So you'd be largely outside of avalanche terrain.
And they told me there's not enough snow to bring my split board.
Yep.
So kind of bummed about that, you guys. But I did not go into this trip with the intention of split boarding it. So, I wanted to, but I can't. I don't even think they're having us bring Abby gear at all.
Yep.
So I'm not bringing any of my Abby gear.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at this for you, Kim, no Abby gear, and then like some of the considerations we talked, one route I'm seeing could be following this zone, your biggest area of risk being right in here where my mouse is now as you get towards the top. And then getting on this ridge line.
Is there any way we can see what's that map that'll show like the vegetation terrain? So it'll show like if it's bushes or whatever it is.
Yep. So this map actually does a pretty good job of that typically, but I'll bump over to let's see if actually let's just go to imagery. So yeah, this is bare, super bare. You have a little vegetation off here, but these mountains are looking super bare.
But that's another thing for anybody watching this is like, when you're looking at these maps and we're talking about alpine, it's snow covered. So right, if these bushes are covered in snow, this is the easiest line to do because you're just going right up snow. But sometimes if it's not covered, then you're just like bushwhacking the entire time, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah, and like you'll be there like essentially midsummer, so there's a chance that there's not even any snow on these areas, so you could even go more straight up if you wanted to, than these routes. But I'm looking at it because I don't know what the conditions are down there right now, and there's potentially snow coming in. I'm just mitigating risk right now by terrain and keeping you on the lower angle terrain. Second option for your route up this would be to follow the main trail that you'll take towards Aconcagua later. One key thing to note is that there is a river here, so I don't know what that river crossing looks like, but you'll be able to see it once you get into your camp.
Okay.
Or into where you're staying. Then you'll be able to hop up onto this ridge line here to get to the summit of this feature.
Okay.
Now, as we mentioned, they're like crossing the river could be a potential crux, but you have a road
Yeah, I was just looking at
right
that.
here to the south that could be a way to cross the river. So I'd say this is probably Route 1.
Yeah.
And then if the river doesn't look too bad, then that Route 2 would be your other option. Now, for me, I always plan a minimum of 2 routes, and sometimes as many as 3 or 4, because then I have my primary, an alternate, a contingency, and emergency. And like if say Route 1 was terrible coming up, maybe I could decide to go down Route 2. Or in this case, like with that river being an initial crux, like maybe Route 1's the only one that's going to be feasible once we actually get there.
Okay.
Now, third option, if it's bare, you might be able to go up Serra Aguda, and there is one more mountain here to the south. There is a county line, so I don't know if that would be an issue for you or not. Again, you'd have to cross a river to get over to that zone. So I don't know what that would look like, but Serra Aguda looks like it could be another potential option for you. Where
What's
again,
that line already on there? What's
on
that?
this,
Yeah.
it depends. It looks like these can either be pre-existing trails or they could be county lines. Or
That's a county line.
yeah,
That looks like an intense trail.
yeah. It right now it doesn't list what it is. It could even be just a ridge line. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
So if you wanted to get up higher to 13.5, and then the snow conditions are not an issue, then your options would, or good potential option would be to get up this mountain here. Depending on what the freeze thaw looks like and the temperatures, like the temperatures are all looking like they're over freezing. So like being in low ground would be a potential issue because you could be in a shooting gallery depending on what the rock and conditions above you look like, with it like all thawing now that we're going into summer there.
Oh, guess what I got? Guess what I got? I totally jacked your helmet. I totally got one, by the way.
Perfect. Got a nice lightweight helmet.
Yeah, it's super light. You guys, his helmet is the lightest thing, and it's white and it's pretty. Sorry for calling it pretty. I got the white one too. But I have my snowboarding helmet is bougie and it has speakers in the ears, and I'm one of those kind of people, I know. So I wanted a lighter weight one because half of this hike is going to be in hot weather or warm weather, and I'm not going to wear a super heavy snowboarding helmet, alpine helmet up in 60 degrees.
Yep. Yeah, so the helmet she's talking about is the Petzl Sirocco.
We need to insert a picture. We need to like put a picture of it.
All right, so got a third route up here now, Route 3, which is depending on conditions could be another option for you.
How are we going to get these? So sure, Cal Topo is great,
Yep.
but how do we get these? 1 to my Garmin InReach and 2 to my watch? Is like
sure.
We're gonna have to download the files and then
exactly. So up here on the left, got the export button, and when I post this, I'll share the link to this map as well. When you export it, you only want to for routes. You only want to export 1 route at a time. So I'm going to actually click the specific route that I want. So if we want Route 3, then I'll export that. For it to go to a handheld GPS, you need to pick the GPX option. and then I'll click export, and that'll download it to your computer.
Deal.
And then once you have it downloaded, you'll be able to import it into your Garmin app, your Sunto app, or whatever GPS or watch you're using.
And I like to have, I overpack, and I take multiples of everything. And I do the same thing with navigation devices. No, I don't take compass, but I like to have my inReach, I like to have my phone, and I like to have my watch, just because if something fails, especially not just in a new area, but in a new country. So
absolutely,
I like to make sure that I'm covered on all bases.
Yeah. And just like I talked with routes where you can have a primary, alternate, contingency, emergency, it's called a PACE plan. I do the same thing with like key equipment such as communications and navigation. So for me, my primary for navigation is always my mental map. And that's why I spend the time looking at these maps. Because then I find that after planning it, I'm typically able to walk it fairly closely. Number two is going to be a digital map. Could be on my phone, could be a GPS route that I've planned, and then my emergencies map and compass, or sometimes just a compass. So let's look at sort of your emergency in this case, Kim. Like if you needed to, like say weather rolled in, you need to get off these, right? So one of the key things, if I'm just doing quick planning that I do, is so for Banderita Norte, my emergency would be south.
Okay.
So like 180 degrees due south on your compass. And that would get you off the mountain. Now, like you could potentially do like something where you follow this line, but bottom line is like, as long as you head south, you'll get off this, especially if there's no snow. If there's snow, then you could be putting yourself in overhead hazard from avalanche here, but that's kind of overhead view along this whole section anyways. If you're taking route 2, then my emergency is going to be west.
Yep.
Right. And it could be like west southwest. We can actually measure it if we want to get even more specific by taking a bearing from the top to where we want to get to. So the bearing on that is 250 degrees true north or 251 magnetic north. So a nice thing in this zone is that magnetic and true north are super close to each other. So you actually don't have to do a conversion between the two, making your life easier. And then for Serra Aguda, we're going to get super specific with our emergency or escape azimuth. Then that would be 114 degrees.
Okay.
Or east southeast. Right. So like that's your like emergency escape plan if weather gets bad and you lose your bearings.
It's me texting you, be like, where do I go?
Yep. But so now, well, actually, sounds like you have a question.
Zoom out. Like I want to see where's the actual Aconcagua route.
Yep.
I haven't even seen this yet.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at this.
So we just looked at your training potential training options when you get in town to help you with your acclimation. Now I'm removing those routes. You can see base camp here and then Plaza de Mulas up at 14K. So your route to 14K follows this line here. So your stats, I can click on that route on CalTopo and pull up the profile.
And then where's like the actual mountain?
Your actual mountain is right here.
Oh, okay, got it. So the hike in is annoying and long,
Yeah.
but then okay, cool.
Yeah, so over 15.5 miles, you gain 5,800 feet of elevation.
Got it.
And I imagine you'll do that as 2 days at least.
I wonder how many miles is the hike from advanced base to the summit? Do we know? Close?
Yeah, I'll get there in a sec. I imagine you'll stop at one of these 2 camps, if not both of them. They're ones that I found as I was looking around on the imagery.
Okay.
So to get to one of the cool things with this profile is you can now see a dot moving on the route. So I can drag to where camp A is. And that gets us to 11,200 feet of elevation and 5.5 miles in. Camp B is a potential second one, is also at 11,900 feet. So I imagine you'll only stop at one of these 2. but you're at 9.3 miles in. So it's an additional 4 miles for no elevation gain
Got it.
right there. But again, we're at like right under 12,000 feet here. And I imagine you'll push up to your 14,000 foot camp for like the next day. And that'll be based on like how people are feeling, how people are acclimating as well. Because you typically don't see too much altitude injuries like HAPE and HACE until you get over 9,000 feet.
So
Some people you will see them, but most people you won't see until over 9K.
interesting. Okay, cool. Got it.
So,
And this is the expedited. When we do our recap for the next one, I'll tell you guys how I like the guide company and all of that. This is the expedited. So this is a 12+2. So they give it's a 12-day expedition +2 for weather that they are just building in. But the normal one, I think, is 18 days.
Yep.
So I'm just doing the expedited because I live at elevation. I'm like, I know it's not going to take me 3 weeks to get acclimated or whatever. So they have the different options.
Yeah. And so there's one thing to consider for this for people watching or listening is I actually just did a winter guide refresher training for the guiding company I work with. And we reviewed the injuries called in since 2015 where people had to be evac'd. And more than 50% of them were on this mountain for altitude sickness. There were a few altitude sickness incidences in the Himalaya, but the majority of them, of about 20 people evac'd over the last 7 to 8 years, more than half have come from Aconcagua. And I imagine that's because of the level of experience at altitude that a lot of the people have going into this zone. And it's typically the first like high altitude mountain a lot of people do, it seems like. So there's like one key thing to consider is like if you haven't been up over 14,000 before, is you might have to take it slower, and that's okay.
And I think everybody, once you get up there, and you spend time up there, you can tell how your body tells you. If you listen to it, it'll kind of tell you like if it's feeling good, if it's not feeling good, what to do.
Yeah. And then so you have a potential other camp that's marked, and I've as Camp C that's at 18,000 feet. And then so depending on the guide company, they might put one at like 16 or 17 as well. Looks like there's some other potential options in there that you could use. But it definitely looks like there's a camp at 18 and then potentially a camp at like 16 to 17 as well.
You know what I'm looking at? That awesome Northwest that probably doesn't have snow on it.
Yeah, this.
No,
This.
keep going. Skiing.
Yeah.
The northwest of the peak.
Yeah, the glacier.
No, left, right there.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like, yes. See, I'm curious to know. I'll take pictures too, so we can see what it actually looks like versus what this map we think it should look like.
Yeah, like maps are one part of the reconnaissance, and then we got to get on ground and see if the reality equals what we think it is. Now for the last bit is we have your 14,000 foot camp to the summit. So going to calculate the profile for that as well. So we have a gain of 8,400 feet, and we go from 14,000 feet to 22,800. The horizontal distance is 5 miles. So for me, I generally don't really care about the horizontal distance once we start gaining that much, but I know that's 8,000 feet of gain. So some people will be able to do that in one day. And what that means is that you don't have to carry like all your sleeping stuff up to like 16 or 18,000 feet. But then for people who don't do 8,000 vertical feet of gain in a day, then you're going to have to do a midway camp, which is going to tire you out. I mean, you probably have to rest at that higher camp too. So just something to consider is that like your probably biggest day on this mountain camp will be around 4,000 to 6,000 vertical feet, depending on where the camps they have you set up are.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. And that's another thing too, is I'm not big on going with guiding companies. I've gone with them in the past. This is an instance where like you definitely want to go with, at least a single woman. I'm going to go with a guide company on this trip, but I would do things probably differently, right? Like if it's a summit day, I feel like you probably would too, is like, okay, we're going to push to the summit and we're going to get back. But now I'm sort of at the mercy of this guide company where they're like, oh, we're only going to do, 4,000 feet and we're camping here. I can't, what sucks is like my personality. I'm just like, no, I want to go. I can't just go. I have to stay with them and do what they tell me to do. So that is sort of the negative of going with the guide company is you have to listen to them, even if like you feel really effing good and you're like, I just want to go. You can't.
Yeah. And like, I mean, as far as HAPE and HACE, like high altitude pulmonary and cerebral edema, those are things that like I imagine this mountain sees a lot of based on just the case study from the guiding company I work with. So I know I'm excited when I get on these mountains, and we can tell, Kim's excited to push it and go hard. So I'm gonna be the voice of temperance, and hopefully the guiding company will be too, saying it's okay to go slower.
That's an eye roll if you guys couldn't see it in the camera. That's why I have reasonable friends, right? And two, going with, I don't know anybody I'm going with. I don't know, people say that they're going to go. We're supposed to be six. There's 6 of us originally. And then when people have to pay, people don't end up committing, but I committed, I paid. So, I also don't love that, right? That's also a negative, is that I don't love going on this with people that you've never climbed with before or people you've never toured with before, just because you don't know their ability. Honestly, I've been on a 4-day trip with people. I hated them. I had like the worst climbing experience in my life because I was stuck with a bad group. And it's just like luck of the draw. You have no idea who you're going to be put with. And I don't know how big the group's going to be either. I don't know if it's going to be 6 of us or 16 of us. Not sure.
Yeah, and so like I've zoomed out on the map now, and you'll be dealing with about 20 to 22 miles of horizontal distance for the whole time when it comes to walking. And then with around 13 to 14,000 feet of elevation gain, all said and done with this. So I'm going to pause the screen share and actually go over to what a standard or schedule kind of looks like.
I'm cold. I'll be right back. I need to check that. I didn't even eat breakfast yet. I'm so behind today.
All right. So what I've pulled up is a rapid ascent itinerary because that's kind of what Kim's going with as well. In this specific itinerary, this company uses altitude tents or like the hypoxico tents to help pre-acclimate as well, which those have shown that they do decrease instances of AMS and cerebral edema, but they don't decrease instances of pulmonary edema. So the mechanism isn't fully understood, but the tents can help. So this company, the way they do it is that you arrive in Mendoza, which is a town nearby, and they helicopter to base camp on day 3, which gets you to 14,000 feet. So Kim, I don't know if you're walking or taking any other options to get to 14,000 feet.
I don't know.
Okay. So yeah, if it's
they're very big. They like haven't sent me. Oh, I'm gonna leave a great review of them and when we're done. They haven't sent me like a fleshed out itinerary, or else I would give you more information.
Sure.
So I don't know.
So yeah, so we're just looking at this one itinerary then that the guiding company Alpenglow Expeditions uses for their rapid ascent, and they do use a van to get to the town, one of the towns, and then they'll helicopter to the base camp at 14,000 feet. So the Plaza de Mulas that we were talking about. So they skip 15 miles of flat walking by doing that. So it'll depend on what the company you're going with is doing, but that's a nice way to save yourself 5,000 feet of gain in 15 miles. If you have the money and your company has that set up.
Yeah,
Day
like
four,
what is Alpengo charging for this?
great
For the
question.
helicopter? Okay.
12,500.
I only paid $5,000 for
Yep.
this, guys. So I did not pay for the helicopter.
That also includes them providing hypoxico acclimation tents too in that 12,000. So that includes a tent rental and then the helicopter transportation. So
Casual.
you get more stuff with the bigger expense. Day 4 is an acclimation day at 14,000 feet. Then they climb on day 5 to Camp 1, which their Camp 1 is 16,500 feet. They'll do an acclimation hike at that elevation, going up to about 18,000 feet, Camp 2, before returning to Camp 1, which they're doing the climb high, sleep low. Day 7 is a climb to Camp 2, where they're going to then stay at Camp 2.
Okay. Oh, they're doing the Polish route. It's a different route. Click that. See?
Yep. Yeah, typically they do they try to do the less crowded routes. Day 8 is a rest day and acclimation day before heading to Camp 3, the high camp. Climb to Camp 3 takes you to 19,600 feet. So as you can see, they're doing fairly small chunks where they're doing like 2,000 feet of gain a day when it comes to sleeping. Day 10, 11, and 12 are summit and weather days. And then day 13 and 14 are heading back to the town that they started in via helicopter and then departing Argentina.
Okay, so this makes sense too. So when you go in for my guiding, I'll post the name to them, whoever I'm using. They get you on all of these extra things that they want you to pay for, and they are charging American prices for this stuff. Like porters are thousands of dollars. I'm like, I am not paying somebody $3,000 to carry my bag. Like I would rather die than have, like, do you know what I mean? So I feel like you're paying more for Alpenglow because they're doing a lot more for
Yep.
it's just more all inclusive, where this one is just like piecemeal.
Absolutely. And like that's one company, and I'd say like go check out the different ones. And like shameless plug, I do work for Alpenglow, but the owners and the guide team there are phenomenal. Like they really do a amazing job of taking care of the clients. I haven't been on any of their international stuff, but like, for example, they had a mass regulator failure on Everest where all of their regulators for their oxygen tanks failed, and they got everybody down no problem. Like because their team is so solid, they were able to adapt to that issue that was fairly common on the mountain that winter, to my understanding, and like get everybody down safely. So that's pretty damn cool.
Shameless plug. I work for Casual. No, that's it. That was super helpful. So I think like takeaways for me is I'm gonna get the routes uploaded on my devices. My inReach is having some issues, so I need to get that sorted out so I can have these routes. And I have the weather site pulled up here. So I'm gonna check more into it. I'm packing this weekend, so I will check on Saturday morning when I wake up, when I start to pack, to have a really good idea of what to bring. But Aconcagua, you guys, it's not a technical hike. Like I don't need a harness. I don't really think I need a whole bunch of stuff. It's just a long, annoying hike that's high. It's not anything super technical. But that's why I want to do something that's high and not technical before I do something high and technical. So that's sort of my thinking.
Yep.
Probably wrong, but
I mean, it gets you to altitude, and the more time you spend at altitude, the better off you'll be future times.
Exactly. Awesome.
Well, I look forward to touching base with you on this, and once you get back and doing a post-trip recap, and then putting that up as another episode to see how this plan actually played out for you.
Sounds good. I hope this was helpful. I know a lot of people they want to watch this, so this is fun.